Depending on how long you've been listening to the Exercise is Health podcast, you've likely heard of this term that we use called body matching. Now, body matching is not a term that you're going to find through the regular fitness industry, but it is something very specific that we think everybody who exercises needs to know about. So in today's episode of the Exercise is Health podcast, we're going to do a deep dive into this concept of body matching. What is it? What do you need to know about it? How can you go about doing it consistently for your workouts? And why should you be body matching? We're going to cue the intro song and then we're going to dive right into this conversation. Welcome to the Exercise is Health podcast, where we're talking about exercise, health, and the interconnectedness of the two. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we will be coming to you every single week from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg. Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is Charlie. Before we dive into this week's episode, I want to let you know that we recently released a book called The Exercise for Life Method. And if you enjoy the conversations that we have every single week on this podcast, then you are going to love this book. So to pick up a free copy of this book, all you have to do is go to exerciseforlifemethod.com. Now, without further ado, let's dive into this week's episode. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. We are your hosts, Charlie
and Julie,
and we're coming to you from our studio, Muscle Activation Schaumburg, here in Schaumburg, Illinois, where we believe that your health is your most valuable asset, and the single best thing that you can do to both boost and protect this asset is exercise. Specifically, exercise is geared towards building the health and function of your muscles. Now, if you caught that in the intro, I said, welcome back, exercisers. Hey, welcome back, exercisers, to the Exercise is Health podcast. Why is that important? Because we want to give you the identity of being an exerciser. You are somebody who exercises consistently. You are somebody who exercises in a sustainable and appropriate way for your body. We want you to start thinking of yourself as an exerciser. And part of being an exerciser is being able to exercise. And one of the best things that you can do to make sure you're able to exercise consistently is something that we call body matching. Now, so often in the fitness industry, it's all about these kind of cookie cutter programs and cookie cutter templates. But for people who actually exercise not only on a consistent basis, but sustainably for decades and decades, they don't follow the cookie cutter templates that are just handed over from the fitness industry. They actually make things really specific to their body, which is an idea that we have developed into the term of body matching. So today we're going to dive into body matching and really explore it and give you the ins and outs of it so you can leave this conversation feeling ready and able to go body match your exercise.
You know, Charlie, you and I have been at this personal training, muscle activation techniques, and really trying to help people exercise consistently day after day for every year to come for just shy of 10 years now. And over time, and I think specifically through this podcast, we've really developed some key ideas that will really, really help people exercise for their life, exercising for life and for health. And sometimes when we come across these cornerstone ideas, we decide to give them a name because it just makes it easier and it makes it so that it's easier to remember. So some of the things that we've created names for is all the time exercise or special event exercise. And one of the biggest ones and our more recent one is body matching. If you can get this idea of body matching down and just start playing with it, let it marinate in your brain, let it play in your workouts, and let it adapt in your workouts will go from being that mainstream cookie cutter experience that you put your body through to I'm going to my workout to improve my body. That's it. Done. That's all. And that's why we decided we need to name this body matching thing because there's no other name in the fitness industry that you and I know of that really encompasses this idea appropriately. And it is such an important idea, and you exercisers need to know about it. And we're going to do this whole podcast all about it because it is, again, cornerstone to exercising for life and exercising for your health.
Absolutely. Now, where this idea came about is because we were discussing the ideas of modifications. And, we so often the word modification gets used in the fitness industry. And usually modifications are just different cookie cutter versions, right? Like if you watch any of the, 80s and 90s step class videos, on the VHS, so you plug in and then you see essentially there's more or less 3 people up there, and one person is doing like the standard version. One person's doing the advanced version, and then one person's doing like the modified version if you can't do the standard version and certainly can't do the advanced version. And so that idea of modification, it kind of has this weird connotation to it, this weird like stigma of, well, it means that you're not good enough yet to be able to do like even the normal version. So we have to modify for you. And that's such a disheartening thing for really anybody to think if they're actually trying to improve the way their body functions, improve their health, improve their strength. And so to be just quite frank, we thought the idea of modifications is just stupid. So we're like, well, we need a different word to convey the idea that you're not modifying anything. All you're doing is an exercise that is appropriate for your body and that matches your body. And all of a sudden it's like, oh yeah, okay, yeah. No, this idea of body matching, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, totally makes sense. And the other thing that, Charlie depicted this VHS video thing where there's like 3 people. You guys all know what we're talking about, right? Like there's a front center person doing the standard, then there's the advanced person and the modified person. And if you have to do the modified person, the way you feel good about it is also by just identifying, well, at least I'm doing something. I got something done. And that's also like, yay, but really? Like, is my workout going to be, well, at least I did something? Because doing exercise should never be just about, well, yay, I did it, or I just got it done, or I just checked it off. There should be intention. There should be focused effort. There is intentional outcome goals that you are looking for from your exercise. And that doesn't fit anywhere into the idea of, yeah, I modified, or yeah, I guess I just did it. I did the best I could. And none of that is included in the body matching. And that's why we were like, dang, we got to talk about this body matching and make it an idea, because the best thing someone can do when you're working with a trainer, which hopefully if you're working with a trainer, your trainer is doing this for you or working with you with this, or if you're following a video, or if you're doing a app class, the best thing that you can do is to body match. There are a lot of almost categories or ideas to think about when you start body matching.
So in thinking about these different categories, usually the first thing that comes up from a body matching perspective is how somebody is doing the exercise, which outside looking in, we often call form, right? So normally when we think of form, we think of like this gold standard, like this is how you do a squat. This is how you do a lunge. And if there's any deviation from that, well, you're no longer doing the gold standard of the exercise. You need to change how you're doing the exercise to match your body to the exercise. And we've seen time and again, this creates so many issues for people. So that's not what we're talking about here. What we're talking about is, how are you doing the exercise in a way that actually matches what your body has available to it on this day and what its abilities are on this day? Okay. And thinking about that, we're talking about like the range of motion that you're using. And so thinking about that, really the big one that comes to mind is the range of motion that you're using, the amount of motion, and how your body is moving relative to what's appropriate for it.
Absolutely, Charlie. The one thing I want to add to that is not only the range of motion, but the positions that you decide to put your body in. So let me just give you an example of a body matching, I almost want to say worksheet. You know how like on worksheets in school, you had like, here's your worksheet, and it's supposed to like teach you a lesson at the end. Anyways, a body matching example and kind of how I worked through this with a client just yesterday. So a pretty regular exercise that people do to challenge their chest muscles is to do push-ups. And my client already knew that she was going to feel uncomfortable going on the floor. And so whether she could achieve a push-up on the floor or not, I didn't want to put her on the floor because she felt uncomfortable doing it. So there was one thing. I knew we were going to do a push-up and it wasn't going to be on a floor. So we actually have a whole bunch of massage tables here that we do muscle activation techniques on. And so I propped her up on the table. So just imagine she's at a diagonal, right? The next thing is when you think about the form of a push-up, you kind of think, okay, your arms bend and then your arms go straight and nothing else really happens to your body. Well, when she holds her body in that planking position, it kind of bothers her low back. So that was a sign that that position of the plank wasn't going to work for her because her body was telling her, and she told me, hey, my back doesn't feel good in this position. So we adjusted. So I actually had her stick her butt up just a little bit so that she was in a plank, but with her butt up a little bit more. And she said, that feels great. So great. Now her body was saying, cool, this position's okay. So then when we started her push-up, we kept her butt up a little bit because we knew her body didn't like the planking position. We started the push-up and she found that if she got her chest all the way to the table, then her shoulder bothered her right at the end. So what we decided was to leave that bottom inch out. So she did a full push-up minus like 1 degree at the bottom. And she felt great doing it. And then after about 5, she felt like her elbow started feeling a little bit weird. So what we did is we played with the position of her hands and we found a position that worked and she could keep going. Thinking about the range of motion, we had to change her range. We changed her position. She was angled. Her butt was up. We changed the position of her hands. And all of these things we could call modifications, and we could call, well, at least we got something done. You know, that wasn't the gold standard push-up. But who cares what the gold standard push-up was? What matters is that we found options, and there was 4 or 5 little adjustments that we made in that one push-up. We found options that, number one, improve the health and function of her muscles and joints that we were working without injuring her, and she still got all that stimulation that we wanted from a push-up. That would be an example of body matching a push-up to someone's body. So you're matching the exercise to your body rather than trying to put someone's body into an exercise. So we're trying to flip-flop the idea here.
Yeah, I love that story, Julie. I love that example because a lot of times when we think about modifying push-ups, it's like, okay, well, you're going to go from your hands and your toes on the floor to your hands and your knees on the floor. Like you go from your toes to your knees, right? So instead of, doing push-ups with your feet on the floor, now you're doing them with your knees on the floor. And that's the extent of the modification. Okay, well, maybe we might add in some push-up handles or some dumbbells to do them on if it kind of bugs your wrist or whatever. But that's about it. Like that's what the mainstream fitness offers as far as like doing modified push-ups. Or they'll be like, oh, those don't work? Okay, we're just going to do them against a wall. And it's like there's no in between. And so what I love that you highlighted there was all the little different variances that you thought through and that you worked through with your client, all of which just enhanced the goal of the exercise, which was to challenge your chest muscles, not to do the gold standard push-up. Like that's not the goal of doing the exercise. The goal of doing the exercise is to improve the health and function of their client's body. And the way to do that most effectively is to effectively challenge the muscles with minimal stress to the joints. And so how do you go about doing that? You highlighted so many awesome ways of just kind of tweaking these little things here and there. But so often I think when people would try to do that on their own, there would be this kind of baggage that comes along with of like, well, I had to do it that way today, but eventually I'm going to get to, doing the gold standard version. And let me tell you, your ability to improve the health and function of your body with exercise has nothing, absolutely nothing to do with your ability to do any kind of gold standard version of any exercise. It makes no difference whatsoever. The only thing that matters is, did you appropriately challenge your body today? And can you come back and appropriately challenge your body again tomorrow?
Yes, Charlie, I love that you said that. It really doesn't matter if you achieve the gold standard exercises, but what matters is that you appropriately challenge your muscles with minimal stress to the joints, because that is how you're going to return to exercise time and time again. So playing with little variations of exercises that you do so that it feels good on your body. And we're not saying to make everything easy and lose range on everything, but we're saying to listen to your body. Be mindful of the places and the ranges where your body is speaking up, and be respectful of those things. Because when we respect our body, that's how your body increases health. It's how you increase mobility, flexibility, functionality. So it all comes down to making sure you're doing the quote unquote form that works for your body, and knowing that these are not modifications. These are actually specifications to make this the most gold standard for my body right now during this workout.
So if you're hearing this, you're thinking, okay, so I body match by like listening to my body, and what else? Like, what else is there to it? So Julie, let's walk through that example that you just gave and kind of talk us through the different variables that you thought about and how you went about making decisions to change or tweak or body match each of the different variables. So let's start with first, you decide, I'm not going to have her do a push-up on the floor. We're going to do a push-up, with the hands on a massage table. And you kind of talked about, well, client feels uncomfortable getting on the floor, so that's a no to begin with. What was the idea behind going to a massage table then?
Great question. So yes, I didn't want to put her on the floor because she already felt uncomfortable on the floor. And I don't know about you, but when I feel uncomfortable, I can't really engage with whatever activity I'm going to do. So we just don't do it. So I actually chose the massage table because here at MAS, our MAT tables, they go up and down. So what's really cool is that I can change the height. So I can actually get the MAT table really low so that, I don't know, it's like a foot off the ground, but I can also make it really high. So it's like 3 feet off the ground. So I love that I can change it, and I can change it really quickly. Second of all, I always think about position first. So the first thing when you think about a push-up is like, okay, well, she's going to start in some kind of plank-ish position. So I just had her go in a plank position, and I said, how you feeling? And immediately she let me know. I also want to highlight that just because this client, I brought up low back issues or a low back, feeling weird or feeling off, you might feel some other stuff. Like, for example, your wrists. The push-up has a pretty extreme starting position for your wrists. Like, I know when Charlie does push-ups, he always grabs push-up handles. That's how he can feel comfortable doing push-ups. So you might get in the position of your exercise, and it might not be your back. It might be your wrists or ankles, I've seen a lot, or knees, whatever. You want to make sure that beginning position, your body's like, cool, I think we could maybe do something here.
Okay, so you chose to have her do the push-up on the table, and the feet were on the ground. It's not like she was doing a flat push-up on the table. Feet were on the ground, so she was angled. And then you said, okay, she's in a plank position. This was starting to bother her low back. And so the next thing you decided to change was kind of her hip position, right? And so you said, well, we want to find a position that her hips can be in to take some stress or at least some symptom away from the low back. So kind of walk me through that thought process.
Yeah, so when we're thinking about positioning, I usually think about what joint is, hollering at us or talking to us, and then what's happening at that joint. So in a plank position, your spine is pretty neutral, straightish, and many people actually are a little bit more of a saggy position. And if you're not, gravity is kind of trying to push, your hips down. Like if you weren't using your muscles, your hips would just kind of sag down. So that's also kind of a more extreme position for the spine. So I knew, okay, let me see if I can get her out of the more extreme extended position of her spine and see if that can be a little bit more comfortable. So I actually had her pop her hips up, and that seemed to really work. So if you have a joint that's feeling weird just in the starting position, you can think, am I in some kind of extreme position? And if so, can I bring it to a more neutral position, especially if it's not the joint you're trying to work? So for example, I brought up the push-up handles, or if you have wrist issues with it. So when you're in a push-up, your wrists are really extended when you have your hands flat on the ground. So again, what Charlie always likes to do, and what a handful of our other clients like to do, is we'll grab dumbbells or push-up handles so that the wrists can be in a more neutral position. So the areas that we're not trying to work are just not going to be in any kind of extreme weird position.
I love that. That's a really key thing. Now, the next thing that you brought up was the depth that was used during the push-up. And a lot of people feel some kind of like almost like a ice pick is being shoved right into the front of their shoulders, especially when they get really low during push-ups. And it sounded like maybe it wasn't that exact sensation, but definitely some negative or undesirable sensation that your client was experiencing in her shoulders. So then talk to us about how you played with the motion to figure out how much motion your client should be using.
Yeah, so this is a great question because most exercises have the gold standard, and then they have the gold standard of like how far you should get down, right? Like a push-up, oftentimes it's like touch your chest to the ground or, whatever. But again, when we body match, we don't want to listen to the gold standard. We want to listen to your body. So all I have my clients do is they're always moving slowly and with control. And if there's part of the range where their body starts speaking to them or speaking up or having symptoms, I just tell them, hey, let me know. And usually what we do is we just leave that section out. And so my client at the very bottom was having a symptom. It was actually in her left shoulder blade at the very bottom. So we decided to leave that bottom inch out, and then she could do her push-ups symptom-free. Now, I think the key here too, when we're body matching, is to, yes, take that as a data point of like, hey, that's what we did last time, but also being open to the next time that we return to push-ups to see what range our body will give us. Because oftentimes when we're consistently respecting our bodies will become, number one, stronger, and number two, more functional. And so I won't be surprised if, in a few months after practicing push-ups, that her body gives her more range without symptoms. If it doesn't, I really don't care because we're able to keep the health and function of this joint and these muscle groups. But if it does, great, we'll utilize it.
And then the last thing you brought up was playing with hand position. And there was some stress that she was feeling, was it in her elbow, that after she did about 5 reps, she started feeling some weird stress in her elbow. And so you were playing with the hand position there. So again, kind of talk us through that, because a lot of times people are thinking, okay, well, when I do push-ups, like it has to be, fingers splayed out wide, palms flat, middle finger pointed straight forward. And then, you go from there. But there are a whole bunch of variations that you can play with your hands. So why'd you start to body match that with your client?
Well, I definitely am body matched because her body was talking to her, and body matching, is a principle of assessment. So even though I didn't know we were going to do that before we started at rep number 5, her body told us we need to make a little specification here. And so what we did was we played with, like what Charlie was saying, like where her fingers are pointed, I changed like her hand position, because something that's interesting about a push-up, which you don't actually need to know this if you're going to body match, but here's why this is my hypothesis of why this happened, was when you do a push-up, your hands are really fixed and your upper body kind of fixes your shoulders. And so your elbows are the ones moving. And so what happens is that sometimes there's weird stresses that go through your elbows because you're not modifying or changing your hand position to accommodate any weird forces going through. So anyways, her elbows were feeling funky, so we knew we needed to body match. And so what we did was we played with different directions of the hand, which then skewed or cocked the elbows in different directions. And we found a position that really worked well for her, and we could continue to appropriately and safely challenge her chest muscles with a push-up without it having detriment to her elbow.
So if you're listening to this and you're thinking, okay, so what's the kind of step-by-step process to go through body matching? Like Julie just laid out beautifully her thought process, how she walked through this with a client. And so like, first of all, you're looking at the position that your body's in, and just from a starting position before you do the exercise. And you see, is anywhere in my body feeling funky? All right, if it's not feeling good, then change how your body's positioned and keep exploring different positions, ways of shifting your body in order to find a position where your body feels asymptomatic. And then you start to do the motion, and you do as much motion as you comfortably can. And if you notice you get to a point where you feel like you can do more motion, but it starts to create a symptom, You don't go into that part of the motion. You stay in the area where you're symptom free. And then as you continue to work through the exercise and your body changes, muscles fatigue, joints may be starting to get stressed a little bit differently, you continue to change how you're executing the exercise so it continues to be symptom free. The only thing that you should be feeling during the exercise are the muscles that you're trying to use, maybe some local fatigue in the muscles, and you may also feel your joints moving depending on what you're focusing on. But you shouldn't feel any kind of weird strain or any kind of weird stress in the joint. You should feel some joint motion, and you should feel some muscle fatigue that's very local and very specific to what you're using. And if there's anything else that you are sensing aside from those things, that's an indication that you need to start changing how you're doing the exercise. So Julie, what I was thinking about while you were kind of walking us through step by step is like our Roomba here at the office, okay? And when we send our Roomba out, it goes, a Roomba is a little robot. It's a little robot that vacuums your space. It'll start vacuuming and spinning around, and then it'll go and it'll like bump into a wall. And it doesn't try to just keep going head forward into the wall. It like hits the wall. It's like, okay, wall's there, and then it turns around and goes. It might come back and hit the wall again, but then it kind of goes and explores. And so just what I was visualizing, why I was coming to that is because essentially, Julie, you were more or less like trying to gauge where the Roomba was within your client's body. Is like, okay, are we hitting a wall there? Is your body saying, no, we shouldn't go there? Okay, cool. Well, let's play in the area where we should be. It's like, and then explore a little more, hit another wall. Oh, we shouldn't go there. Okay, cool. Then we kind of go, explore in the area where we should be. And so that was something I was visualizing in my head while you were talking about it. Maybe that's helpful for you. Maybe it's not. But I think just to see this idea of kind of exploration of our bodies and what's appropriate for our bodies while we're doing the exercise is such a key component to this whole idea of body matching.
So use this body matching assessment in every exercise that you do and continue to give yourself permission and to expect it to be the normal, to constantly be body matching as you work through your sets and reps of exercise, because this is the way that you are going to, this is the way you are going to maximize that muscle stimulation, which is what brings about so many health benefits, and minimize that joint stress, because we have to continue to strive to exercise in a manner that will sustain our health, build our health for years and years and years and years to come.
So who do you know that needs to hear this episode? Who do you know whose workouts feel like they're breaking down their body and it doesn't feel good while they're exercising because they keep trying to fit their body to the gold standard of these different exercises that they're doing? Share this episode with them so they can learn about this principle of body matching and how to go about implementing it into their own workouts. And while you're online, head on over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and review. It helps people find this podcast when they're looking for information on exercise and when they're looking for information on health. So if you found value in this conversation today, let us know by leaving us that 5-star rating and review. Well, thanks so much for tuning in. We always appreciate it. Have a fantastic week, and we'll talk with you all next week. So how'd you like that episode? Did you find the information useful? If you enjoyed what we discussed today, then you are going to love the Exercise for Life Method, which is a book that we just put out and you can get a free copy of by going to exerciseforlifemethod.com. All we ask is that you pay for shipping and handling. So head there now and get your free copy, as well as some exclusive bonuses that you will get instant access to when you get the book. You can learn more and get your copy at exerciseforlifemethod.com. This podcast is for information purposes only. The statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Julie and Charlie Gates, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse effects from the use of information contained herein. Opinions of guests are their own, and this podcast does not endorse or accept responsibility for statements made by guests. This podcast does not make any representations or warranties about guest qualifications or credibility. This podcast may contain paid endorsements or advertisements for products or services. Individuals on this podcast may have a direct or indirect financial interest in products or services referred to herein. If you think you have a medical issue, consult a licensed physician.